Hello, I'm Johnny Tucker, editor of Blueprint, and welcome to the Blueprint Innovation Interviews at ARPA. We have 4 interviews for you, and we'll be talking about the essential nature of innovation and what it does for architecture in practice.
I tend not to really think about the word innovation. What I'm interested in is the unknown territory, something waiting to be discovered. And that's very much the kind of principle of my work as a process, is trying to discover things we don't know yet. Sometimes it might be understanding a site at a level which it really hasn't been understood before. Sometimes it might be about a material that we haven't asked or persuaded to act in a certain way before, and we figure out a way of doing it. Sometimes it might be a way of engaging the public, or engaging a client or a user in a project which hasn't been considered, or it might be an economic model for constructing something. My job is to sort of mediate those and try and push them in new directions. I try to do that through the work in the studio. Yeah, I think you could take the method, like the scientific method, as a good analogy for how I work. There's a kind of existing truth that exists, and through the projects we try and bounce up against that and see if we can push it in a new direction. And I kind of like to think of, let's say, the status quo, which the majority of people are quite happy to accept as a reality. I see there's probably something beyond that, which we should use our projects to figure out and to test. Our work is heavily research-based, and I think you could draw some sort of analogy to a scientific method. And the research begins with sort of listening really carefully to a client in a brief, whatever form that client might take, and listening to a site, unraveling everything about its history and its sort of potentials and where it could move in the future, or it might be looking at a whole city. It's not about questioning something just because there's a bloody-mindedness about it. It's actually saying, I believe there's something beyond this that we're not really we haven't discovered yet, and we should use a project to find that out. Sometimes there'll be an ongoing piece of research, something that we're trying to prove, something we're trying to discover, and the projects that each project is a way of pushing that discovery a little bit further. And I see it as our role as architects, as designers, to take each project and try and push it as far as it will go. Because if we don't do that, what we're doing is replicating other people's work, and it's sort of assuming that replication, it's the peak of our kind of knowledge or peak of our discovery, which I kind of refuse to exist. It is. If I take the Serpentine project as an example of our process, the brief was to respond to a building called Queen Caroline's Temple, which was constructed in 1734. The temple sits in the middle of this incredible landscape, Kensington Gardens. I think the garden is a kind of manifestation of like a new way of thinking about space and time and all the sort of things of the picturesque. So that is all history, but at the same time it's important for how we might react and what mark we might make on the park today. So I got really into that, and one aspect in particular I was interested in is the orientation of Queen Caroline's Temple. Why did Kent choose to direct it a certain way? It's not facing east, it's not facing north, it's pointing straight out along the Serpentine Lake. You could sit in the original temple and get this view across the water. And then I started plugging the kind of orientation, the orientation of it into sun path analysis, and seeing what happens on the date where the sun is aligned with this temple. And it turns out that it's orientated to the sunrise on Queen Caroline's birthday, which is the 1st of March. There's a pavilion, essentially, which is orientated towards one moment in time, one viewpoint, and one moment a year for one person. Development of that is to create a summer house which orientates towards multiple viewpoints, multiple points of time, and for many people. So it's a sort of inverse of the project that we found there. That's the reaction. And I do that through having a timber slatted structure, which as opposed to a kind of single viewpoint, there's almost a radial dispersion of viewpoints around the park. So you kind of It creates a new center. You sit on this aluminium table that's in the middle, and you get a view out towards Queen Caroline's Temple, the Serpentine Pavilion, the Serpentine Lake, out towards this incredible green landscape beyond. You could see it as a democratization of Queen Caroline's Temple. If you remember the time of when the Olympics came to London, which is a really exciting moment, there were also sort of voices from Londoners about the presence of sponsors amongst all of that. And I think we all felt there could be more generous ways that the sponsors could create their presence in the park. One of the core ideas of this project that we proposed and we eventually built was to have a pavilion with no branding on it at all, that would use colour only as a way of kind of marking the brand, which in this case was Coca-Cola, and the colour in this case was red. It was about creating a building which you could touch and play like a musical instrument. So it's sort of, in a way, breaking down known physical rules, let's say, of how you engage with the building. This is a building that you had to interact with and respond to, which was a way of getting the public to sort of free themselves in a way, the same way they do when people play sports and so on. So it's like physical activity being part of the way you explore a building. And there was a 200-meter ramp that kind of circled up to a view of the Olympic Park at the top. And along that ramp, you got to experience a piece of music which had been sort of segmented up into kind of interactive stems that you could go and individually play and remix as you worked your way up. Well, the project we did at the Sochi Winter Olympics played with a similar idea of audience and participation. The idea of the hero and the person at the center of say 100,000 spectators doesn't mean as much anymore today, because a person with a YouTube channel can have 9 billion views, within a year or something. So this is the exciting time we live in, and this project tries to explore that phenomenon. I think that was particularly important at the time in Russia, because there's a lot of conversation about inclusivity that was happening, rightfully happening, and I wanted this pavilion to be incredibly inclusive. And the best way of doing that was by making its facade something that could, in a way, showcase everyone that visited the building. So I created a building which was a digital Mount Rushmore. Everyone who visited the building could become its facade, effectively. And the building was composed of a bit like one of those pin toys, this ours had 11,000 pixels, essentially, which subdivided its surface, and then these could move in 3 dimensions. And everyone who visited the building would be 3D scanned, and they were, and their faces were displayed on the facade as heroes, essentially. The nice thing as well is that we took those 3D scanners and we toured them around Russia. So even people who couldn't go to the games also had this sort of telepresence there. So turning the idea of celebrity and audience and hero on its head. Helsinki is a city which I've been visiting for many years. So when the competition for the Guggenheim came up, I felt that I knew the site very well, and I felt we have to be involved in this. And it's an opportunity to sort of bring together all of the people in Finland who I'd met over time and work with them as members of the team, the design team. On one hand, you could say that it is the knowledge is sourced from a lot of conversations, a lot of very deep research about the place and its history, but also Helsinki and its moment in time right now. And at the same time as trying to create something new, we tried to create something that has resonance with a very large amount of people, so it can be adopted as something that really is grown from that place. The texture of glass is such that it allows it to take on the kind of prevailing light and weather conditions, which change dramatically through the year in Helsinki. So in the winter, this building becomes winter. It's a piece of ice in a way. And in the summer, say in sunrise, it becomes sunrise. The whole building glows. And so this gradient is also kind of a gradient of public exploration of the building as well. Pushing the possibilities of the relationship between people and architecture, people and the city. That's really the innovation, is believing in the possibilities. If we place people at the center of architecture, it begins to have so many more possibilities than if we put architecture at the center of architecture.